So basically I'm saying our general approach to diversity is nonsense. So what I'd like to do is go very briefly through how I see most organizations and corporations trying to deal with the problem of diversity, which is not a problem. Give a perspective very briefly of what diversity really is, and then a couple of indications of possible solutions and one or two examples of solutions that have worked in the past. And afterwards, very much welcome questions at the end of it. So just open up for that. Okay, the basic problem with diversity is our attitude towards diversity. And it's very simple. We say diversity is a problem, and the problem is that we see diversity as a problem. Which means we can't possibly find a solution, because it's not a problem. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's a fact of life. It's just there, it's with us, it's part of us every day. Diversity is a fact of life. So we need to ask ourselves a completely different set of questions. And what we tend to do in organizations, say, right, okay, diversity, yeah, as Hugh mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's not very comfortable. Yeah, we know we've got it there, we need to somehow deal with it. Maybe it's to do with ethnic minorities, maybe we're doing business internationally, but yeah, I know, we've got some great business with the Greeks, for example, or the Argentinians, but we're not really sure how to deal with them. So we set up wonderful training courses. And we call them diversity training courses. Now, there are a number of problems with diversity training courses. The very first problem is that we try to get people to behave in the same way, which is conformity. And what happens when we have conformity? Well, people get into a set of norms, and you're actually taking out the diversity. Well, you're not taking it out because it's there, but you're attempting to take out the fact of diversity from your organization. So it's a complete contradiction in terms. The other thing is it encourages people, by encouraging people to behave in a particular way, what you're encouraging is assimilation, which you're saying, dear friends, please behave in this way, and our Greek and Argentinian friends and our Australian friends will all say, okay, yes, that looks nice, but actually it doesn't, because they can still see it's not the real you. And you don't feel very comfortable with it either. And when people don't feel comfortable with what they're trying to do, there's a kind of inner resistance. They're not being themselves. So that's one level on which it doesn't work. And of course, not even to mention the point that when people are told what to do, they say, hey, why should I do what you're telling me to do? It's a natural reaction. People don't like being told what to do. They like to act independently. Of course, in all organizations, we need frameworks in which we can move. Yanis, you talked about football earlier on. Well, there are rules to football, and it's the same with an organization. There's a pitch, and when the ball's out, it's out. You have to start playing a different way, and it's the same in any organization. You can use all kinds of sports analogies, but the people on the playing area, the 500, the 5,000, the 50,000 people, the 500,000 people in the organization have still got to know where the playing field is, but they need to be able to act within that. The second problem is that training programs tend to attempt to change people's behavior. And that brings up another set of issues. You can get somebody to change their behavior. This is what actors do all the time. And we get wonderful entertainment from actors. We love them. But actually, we don't want people to be acting in the organizational field. We want them to be themselves. We want them to be bringing themselves out and not putting on a show. Somebody can behave in what is perceived to be a perfectly acceptable manner, but what's the real thoughts? What's going on inside them? What's the real thoughts? They can be just as negative. So actually, what you're doing is suppressing the problem. And at some stage, particularly in the business field, stress arises. And when the stress is there, then the explosion will come. So it's actually another negative effect. And the third point is something that you mentioned earlier. What about innovation? How much innovation do we get when we have conformity? It's basically zero. And so it's a total contradiction in terms to any organizational goals. Let's stay with the corporate world. Corporations need to develop. They need innovation. Almost every mission statement, and I'm not a friend of mission statements for a whole set of other reasons, but almost any mission statement or almost any statement that you're going to see concerned with the vision of an organization is going to say something about innovation and development. Well, you're not going to get that by conformity. It just suppresses it completely. And in the end, with no innovation, organizations die. And there are so many examples around. One of the latest ones to have been in the news, I think it was about 2 or 3 months ago, was the case of Kodak. I mean, they were world leaders not so long ago, 20 years ago. Digital photography came in and they weren't able to deal with it. So they basically died. You know, the world name. And I'm sure everybody from their own fields can find similar examples to that. Okay, so that's not the answer. So where are we going? What is diversity? Something you mentioned also, Hugh, we tend to look at it far too narrowly. Diversity is far more than just ethnic differences. It's far more than national differences. Let's just stay with the organization world for a moment. National culture. Well, we can define ourselves by our passports. Yeah, but I've got 2, for example. I could have 3 if I wanted to. And in today's world, I'm by no means unique. How many people do we know who are living in Brazil, children living in Brazil with, I don't know, a British mother and a Canadian father? How many languages will they be speaking? Who knows? And there are, any number of permutations, and you're going to get young people, especially young people, but also people from my generation in this world who don't fit into these categories. So it's another reason to look beyond that. Ethnic culture, well, do we need to say much more about that? I mean, the old definitions which are still used, you know, so-called minorities. The United States love their categorization. They're Hispanic, they're black, they're mixed race. What does mixed race mean? I mean, and so on. We could go on. Gender, I think, is an obvious one. And it's nice to see at least a touch of gender diversity in this room. I've worked with, I've worked in so many boardrooms, and especially in mediation assignments that I've had, where there's been no gender diversity, and I think maybe that's been one of the problems. Age diversity, generation diversity. Over the last 10 years or so here in Europe,
you went online, by the way.
I'm sorry?
There are at least 2 ladies online.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, ladies. Thank you very much. I can't see you on my screen here, but welcome. Nice to see you.
Isabella from Zurich.
Thanks, Mario. For the last 10, 12 years or so, the necessity to look at how we work with each other across generations, that awareness has been growing. I don't think it's nearly advanced enough. I think there's an awful lot of, let's say, unconscious discrimination going on, either to take the extremes from the older towards the younger and also from the younger towards the older. We still tend to think in terms of this is the right way to do things, which of course is not the answer. There are many right ways to do things, and if we were in a workshop situation, we could demonstrate that very clearly here. But That's another question. But there are also some other elements that tend to get forgotten. Just looking around this room, in terms of professional cultures, I can see diplomats, I can see IT specialists, I can see bankers, consultants, people with an HR background. I think we all have our own perspective of the world. And that's just in this room, and we are, what, 10, 12 people here or so? And of course you find that in every organization. The list can go on and on and on. And what are these people supposed to be doing? They're supposed to be working together in terms of achieving the organizational goals. So many corporations these days are project-based. And in project-based organizations, you're going to have members, project members, with completely different backgrounds from numerous organizations simultaneously. And each organization has its own culture, its own way of doing things. And the goal is the same. I mean, a project is an organization set up for a specific period of time. That's all it is. It's the same. It's an organization set up to achieve particular goals for a specific period of time. So you have to build up a project culture in the same ways that you need to, I think, actively and proactively create an organizational culture. So we've got the different layers of culture, and there are numerous subcultural layers there as well, but generally all I'd like to demonstrate with this is culture is simply a fact of life. And if we take any of us personally, then at least 5 of these 7 layers here, we can apply them to ourselves in one way or another. So what is culture? It's actually not nearly as complicated as we try to make it. All it is simply a worldview that governs our perspective on any aspect of life. Put it in other words, it's our attitude, our perspective on life. Whether the life we're talking about is the holistic life in general, or whether it's the life in the corporate perspective, or the organizational perspective. So you've seen that by trying to focus on behavior, we're not really going to change anything, not really at a deeper level. So we have to change, and we have to work on attitude. One thing I think is very important when we're trying to work with people to gain a different perspective is not to say your attitude, for example, Mario, on diversity is wrong, because you're going to say, wait a minute. And that's another thing that many programs tend to do. Because, of course, your attitude isn't wrong. Nobody's attitude is wrong. It is what it is. Same as diversity is what it is. But the objective should be to try to gain a different perspective on what it could be. And then it's up to you anyway. And it's not about running programs. In a kind of past life, I learned during my 8 years in Asia to talk in these terms. I used to actually own a training company. And at that time, I seriously thought that training was the answer, the solution to the problems. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. But I learned later on, actually, that's not. So I've stopped that now. I've stopped doing trainings altogether. Because the point is not to train, but the point is to bring the people together who need to work together and get them to ask themselves a whole different set of questions. And I'm going to put up here now 1 or 2 examples of questions which we'll just look at very, very briefly, because the questions in themselves contain a whole bunch of other questions. And these are questions that organizations need to ask themselves if they really want to introduce an innovative culture. So one as an example, let's skip that. What do you want your corporation to be? What you're asking here is like, what's the corporate culture that you want it to be? What's the message you're putting out to the world? It's not a question you can answer immediately. It's a question that will actually take a long time to come to a solution, because it's not one or two people that can answer this. We hear of corporate executives going away for visioning weekends and saying, right, at the end of the weekend, we've got it now. No, you haven't. I've heard that so many times. And you see them come back and they make up a bunch of wonderful posters, place them around the corridors, and the people come back and look at them and say, oh, we've got another set of these. And I had the experience it's a long time ago now, about 15 years ago. I was working with a group in the corporate headquarters of a very large German company. I'll say no more than that. And we were coming back after lunch. And there were a new set of wonderful, beautifully artistic, visionary posters. And one of the guys said to me, he said, I can't look at this shit any longer. I've seen it all before and it makes no difference. That was his comment. And I know many of you could possibly say, yeah, we've heard something similar. I know a lot of my colleagues could. It doesn't do anything. It's purely superficial. What you've got to do is actually get in and work with the people. You've got to actually involve the people in building the culture you want. People want to be involved. They want to activate themselves. That's how you get. That's the only way to get engagement. You can't demand or command engagement. You can only get engagement by pulling the people in. And then you come to these questions like this. How does your corporation need to be to innovate and grow? And that's all about involvement. This is the corporate, when you start asking this and all of the questions that will deviate off of this, that's about involving the people. Now, obviously, this is often not very comfortable for executives who are used to having control. But control is a kind of myth as well, because you don't. You can control statistics, you can control numbers, and it's important to do that. Of course it is. We need budgets, we need limits, we need a framework. It's the playing field that we were talking about earlier. But if you really want engagement, and if you really want innovation, it's not about control at all. It's about giving people the space and the freedom to work. That's the only way innovation can come. Another example. We hear an awful lot these days, and I'm hearing it here in Germany all the time, about the skilled labour shortage. There are some corporations that don't suffer from it at all. They get enough people to come and work with them. It's not an issue. People want to go there. It's the corporations, it's others. And there's something wrong, because why is it that people don't want to go to work for Corporation X or Corporation Y? They're not very popular. There's something that doesn't quite tick. There are league tables always. There are so many surveys going around of the best companies to work for. You can get yourself certified, good place to work at, great place to work, etc., etc. And there are a number of these initiatives going around. Why do people want to work with one and not the other? And just refer back. That's the question we need to go back to again. How does it need to be so that people can say, okay, I want to come and work with you? And it's not only here in Germany. I was speaking over the weekend to somebody from the UK saying, yeah, we've got exactly the same problem. Yesterday, Switzerland, France, was at an international conference yesterday. It's the same problems all around the Western world. What is it that you need to do so that people are going to say, I want to come to work with you? Different sets of questions. And what happens once they start working with you? How are you going to involve them? Very often in conventional, traditional structures, who makes the decisions? Where are people involved? Especially younger people coming into a corporation. Oh, we know how young people are. They're full of energy. If I remember myself, they want to come and they want to change something. They want to change the world. All young people want to change the world. It's natural. And we've all got great ideas. I say we, I've got a few grey hairs now, but yeah. We were all like that. And I see young people, you know, young colleagues, friends today, and they want to change something. They're full of ideas, and they come into what is very often a static organizational culture, and they feel suppressed. And at some stage, they're going to leave. How many people have I spoken to recently who are working for some of the, working for the big four consultancies? And they say, yeah, I'm going to stay here for 3 years, maybe maximum 5 years, learn what I can, build up my network, and then I'm going to leave because I need to spread my wings, I need to open out. And basically they all do. So another question. Who do we invite to our think tanks or innovation centres? And this question even goes further. Because if you're looking for real innovation, you don't just ask the experts. If you're looking for a new model to solve a particular problem, and we're talking a lot here in the IT field about which I understand nothing. I'm a user. That doesn't matter. I'm not saying you should invite people like me, but maybe you want to invite a few biologists or chemists who know how to solve a problem from a different perspective, or a geographer, or a historian. Probably the or a philosopher, even. Probably the best known example of innovation by cutting across thought patterns can go back to the Middle Ages, really, in Renaissance Italy, the Medici effect. It was a purely random collection of people that the Medici family brought together to move life forward. And we all know what Da Vinci brought to the world. But he didn't bring it alone. He brought it with... It was the impulses that he got. That's what innovation's about. And it's about using the diversity that you've got in your natural environment. And I don't remember my life back in the Renaissance period, but I'd be very surprised if people in that period even used the term diversity. I don't know whether the word existed, but I would be very surprised to learn that it did exist in that era. But it's been with us all the time, it's nothing new. How do we make decisions? Who do we involve? It's a similar question. Okay, so what's the solution? How can we do this? And it's actually quite easy. It's not nearly as difficult as we make it sound. We think diversity is a complex problem, so we try to look for complex solutions. That's the first mistake. The more complex, one, it's not a problem, we've seen that. But we're dealing here with people, and within each of us we've got more than enough complexity. And then when two people get together, it rises exponentially. And when 3, 4, 5, 20, 30 people get together, well, it's immeasurable. So the approach is not to look for complexity, the approach is to look for simplicity, and emphasize simplicity here and not simplistic. The two terms are very frequently confused. We need a simple approach, but not a simplistic approach. And the approach is actually quite obvious, because when you get people together, you've got a group of people together who are supposed to be working together. There is a common objective, there is a common purpose, and you have to get them integrated, working together on that common purpose. It's all about integration. We work with the differences that are there. We don't spend too much time talking about the differences. Yeah, we do approach them. But we use the business or the organizational goals as a vehicle, and that's what people are there. People are naturally curious. They want to work together. We're social animals. We're social beings. We want to do stuff together. So we have to take the potential conflict out of it. It's as simple as that. I'm just going to present very briefly very briefly, 3 cases of multi-level, multi-layer, multicultural initiatives that did work. The first one you see there, Rebel, it was a Design for Environment project financed by the European Commission in the rail industry. You can see the cultures involved, multiple cultures. You can see the organizations involved. You had service providers, you had systems manufacturers, all of the rail manufacturers we know. You had research institutes. You had a university. You had sub-suppliers who, of course, had their own interests. And you had the European Commission, who was keeping an eye on things and who are actually providing a great deal of the finance. You had electrical engineers, many kinds of engineers, management, a university professor, who came from he was a professor at a very traditional Catholic university in Belgium, actually. And he had a very strict view of how things should be done, and he wasn't the project manager. It made it very interesting. The project manager was female here and a lot younger than him. That created a very interesting dynamic. But it worked. The project didn't come in on time, it came in early. It didn't come in budget, it came in below budget. It was a 3-year project and it worked. The second example here is a corporate acquisition, which, like most acquisitions, are called mergers, but I'm not sure that I've ever seen a real merger in the business world. Somebody said to me yesterday at this event, so you do a lot of PMI, post-merger integration. I said, no, I do post-acquisition integration. I think it's better to be honest with the people about what's really been going on. Because some people at the end of an acquisition process are not going to be very happy. There are normally at least two people vying for one position. So let's be honest about it to begin with. Again, the mixed nationalities, not only European this time, but international. The companies, it was Atrans and Bombardier, and what was interesting there was actually that at the time, this took place, I can't remember, it was now 2001 or 2002, I can't remember exactly. But Atrans at the time was the largest rail systems provider in the world, and they were taken over by Bombardier, who were an awful lot smaller. But they had the finance. Many people only knew Bombardier as an aircraft manufacturer. It's now the largest in the world. Again, the complete mix of professional cultures. And the last one was an insurance company, what we call in the consulting field a very cold business. Insurance is cold. It's like banking. It's about numbers, figures, stats. IT systems integration. It's not a reference to the people, it's a reference to the industry culture, not at all a reference to the people. IT systems integration is also a cold field, again, not a reference to the people. And you had 3 country HQs actually vying for their own systems. The corporate headquarters was in one of the 3 countries you see there, UK, Germany or Sweden, I'm not going to say which one. But again, they had to integrate. There was no doubt about it. And I was brought in on this as the project consultant by the IT external project consultant, which was very good that there was an external consultant actually to work that. And we worked in tandem, integrating them, and it worked. Again, another project, because of course this systems integration, it's a project, came in early, below budget. So it works, and it's all about bringing the people together and using the diversity. So taking note of your reminder about time, Yanis. Thank you very much. I'll open up to questions, and I welcome.